So I just finished my first book of the year by Henry Nouwen. It's called Making All Things New. And it's a small book. It's about 100 or so pages. And the way that it's written, the text is kind of in the middle, so you can get through it pretty quickly. I think it was a great way to start my reading journey this year. And basically, the book is about what the spiritual life is and how, when you're living a spiritual life, it's first of all an attempt to live more holy. When I say holy, I don't mean like in a Christian way, but just you're living more wholesome, and you're not living with worry and busyness and your occupations and your preoccupations kind of just guiding your life. So it's about a quality of living. And I want to share a couple of quotes with you that really stuck out to me as I read this. The first is on page 21, where he says, "The spiritual life is not a life before, after, or beyond our everyday existence. No, the spiritual life can only be real when it is lived in the midst of the pains and the joys of the here and now." Man, I think that's so important because I fall into the temptation to look at the spiritual life as something that is away from the world and not as engaging with the world. The difference between someone that is living a spiritual life and someone that is not living a spiritual life is in the quality of living. Someone can be a teacher and someone can be a janitor or the president. It doesn't matter what your occupation is as you're living the spiritual life or what you're doing with your life, but it's about the quality of that life. It's about the character of the individual. So he gets to the root of this, and I think it's important for me to remember this, because there's a way for me to live to where everything in my life can be glorifying to God. There's a way for me to brush my teeth in a way that is worshiping and honorable to God. And the way he talks about it in this book is just about recognizing the presence of God in all of these areas of our lives, and using solitude as a way to experience the presence of God. As we're in solitude and as we're by ourselves in prayer, we're opening ourselves and we're creating space for the presence of God, but also using community and our time with people as a way to experience the presence of God. So he talks about those two things in the book. And listen to this quote on page 66. "A spiritual life without discipline is impossible. Discipline is the other side of discipleship." I really appreciate this sentence because I really appreciate spiritual disciplines, and I am passionate about practicing spiritual disciplines because I know that in order to live a spiritual life, you need discipline. And you have to set aside time. You have to set aside space. And that's what discipline is all about. It's just creating space so that you can be more aware of the presence of God. And you do that when you're in solitude, in prayer, when you're journaling, when you're walking outside, when you're worshiping God, when you're with other people as well. I just finished a meeting with my friend Todd. We get to have coffee together. We don't, it's funny because both of us don't drink coffee. We drink tea when we go there. Well, we try to meet just about every week. Sometimes we meet every other week. But when we get together, we're energizing each other spiritually. We're praying with each other. We are talking about our lives. We're updating each other. And I need that, man. I know that it's important for me to be by myself with God, but I also need to be with people. And I need to be encouraged by people. I need to be challenged by people. Community is meant to do that for us. And this will seal it up. This is on page 93, where he says, "In this book, I have described the spiritual life as the active presence of God's Spirit in the midst of a worry-filled existence." So that is the spiritual life, being aware of God's Spirit and God's presence, even in the midst of our worry and our busyness and our living, which is why it's not separate and apart from our existence. We don't wait till we die to live the spiritual life. The spiritual life is right here and right now. He also says, "This life becomes a possibility when, by the disciplines of solitude and community, we slowly create some free inner space in our filled lives, and so allows God's Spirit to become manifest to us." So through the disciplines of solitude and community, we create space for us to be aware of God's presence, I think that's what the Christian life is about. It's about creating space in our lives, surrendering ourselves so that God's presence can be filled within our lives and within our hearts and within all of us. And so that we can go out into the world and bring that presence, that healing presence to others in a non-judgment way, in a sacrificial way, in a humbling way. So I love this book. It was very simple. Like I said, it's Henry Nouwen, Making All Things New. I think he's my favorite author right now. I'm working on another book by him that I'm reading. I've already read probably about 3 or 4 books by this author. He's an excellent Christian author. So there it is. 1 down, about 24 to go.